Hey everyone, Brenda here. So I'm going to be doing a series on peyote stitch. And what I want to do is I'm going to start with something that is quite easy. And when I say quite easy, what I mean is I'm going to be doing sort of easing you into peyote. I mean, there are a ton of videos out there on peyote stitch. I'm going to be showing you a really easy way to actually bezel this because I'm going to turn this into a pendant. And I want to show you an easy way to sort of start peyote. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I have some really cool ideas, in particular on how to make this easier, I guess. And so anyway, enough talking, let's get started. So I'm going to show you how to bezel this, and I'm going to show you by using a brick stitch pattern, how to get started with a peyote row, so to speak. Okay, so what are we going to need? Well, a thread zapper. I'm going to be using some Fireline 2.7 kilogram in crystal. I'm going to need these because I'll be using my size 12 beading needle, my Pony brand. Probably can't see that. And the reason I need these is because that needs to be squished down in order to fit through the eye of the needle. The colors that I have chosen, I'm going to be doing a Delica 11-0. This is a silver lined crystal for the outside. And then to kind of snug it in tightly, I'm using these Miyuki 15-0 rounds, and this is opaque brick red. So this is a beautiful color. I love it. And believe me, it looks lovely with this. Looks terrible on the viewfinder, but okay. So I think that is all our materials, and I'm gonna get myself set up, and I'll be right back. So I've got my needle threaded. Move a few things out of my way. So yeah, clever me using this color to bezel with. I will do my best to make sure it shows up on screen. Now, in terms of a tail, it doesn't really matter how long or short the tail is going to be. That's going to leave enough for me to sew in. So I'm going to start, first of all, with beginning the very first stitch with a ladder stitch. So I need to pick up 2 beads onto my needle. And let's just make sure you can see that. So 2 beads onto my needle, and I'm going to slide those down, and so this is the first bead that I put on, and that's the second bead. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to go up through just the first bead. I'm going to put my thumb on everything, hide it from you for a second. I'm going to kind of sort my beads out here a little bit. There we go. And what should happen is you'll see that they should be sitting side by side. And so my thread is coming out of this one. I'm going to go back down this second one again. Hold on to both of those. And then now it's coming out of the bottom of this. I'm going to go up this one more time. Okay. And I'm going to flip it so the thread is coming out on the right hand side for me. And so now we're going to actually start brick stitch. And I don't know if you can see here. I should have used different thread. That would have been really easy for you to see. But if you can't, trust me, it's there. So between the 2 beads, there's actually a thread bridge, and maybe I'll just stick my needle underneath that. Maybe you can see it if I do that. So you can see that thread bridge, hopefully, underneath the needle. So we're going to be using the thread bridges, and from here on in, we're going to be putting 2 beads on at a time, and they will always have a thread bridge between the 2 of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm picking up 2 more beads. Slide those down so you can see that. So I have 2 more beads picked up there. And now I'm going to ignore them for the moment, and I'm going to put my needle underneath that thread bridge. And the first part's really hard because you don't have a ton to hang on to. So just give me a moment. Let me just fight with this for a second. And I'm going to go underneath that thread bridge right there. Okay. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull. And you'll see in a second, if I can get this to sit the way I want it to, you'll see those 2 beads are now sat on top of the bottom 2. My thread is coming out to the bottom of this bead right here, and I've actually hooked onto that thread bridge below. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up that same bead, and I'm going to pull. And you'll see that these 2 beads I just added on are slightly offset from the ones on the bottom there. Now if I wanted to reinforce this the way I normally do with brick stitch, I would come back down this one and back up this one, but I don't need to do that. They're actually sitting okay. So now I'm going to just tug on my thread a little bit. Now in order to make this work properly, I want to flip those beads around. So my thread is always coming out on the right hand side. Okay, let's do that again. So I'm going to pick up 2 beads. I'm going to go underneath that thread bridge, and as this gets bigger, it will longer, and you've got more to hold on to, it'll be a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to pull my thread right through. I'm going to hold on to this thread, and the thread is coming out from underneath that thread bridge. So I'm going to go put my needle through this second bead. So remember that the thread was coming out on the right hand side, so I'm going to go up the left hand side always. And that's a good way to remember it. So I'm going to flip this over again, so my thread is coming out the right hand side, the top of the right. So it should come out the top of the right, and then when I add my beads on, I want to go back up the left side of the beads that I just added on. But you'll notice here how there's these are kind of all offset from each other. So let me get a few more rows on. I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to add a few more rows on. But first I'll show you that one more time. So I've got my 2 beads on. I'm just going to put them on my needle. I'm not going to worry about sliding them down. And I'm going to hold on to this whole mess here. Do you see how I'm holding this string, the one that's coming out my right hand side? I'm holding it between my fingers, and I'm holding these beads down here. They can't get away on me that way. So now that I've got a little bit more length, it's a bit easier. Okay, so I've got my 2 beads on, I added. Now I'm going to take my needle underneath that thread bridge that is connecting those 2 beads side by side. And I'm going to pull. There. And now I'm going to hold on to that thread again, and I'm going to put my needle up that left bead. Remember, it's being hooked underneath these beads on that thread bridge below. Okay, and I'm going to pull, and there we go. So now you can see they're kind of offset from each other. And that's what we want. That's what we want. So I'm going to get a little bit of length there, and I will be right back, and I'll show you how we're going to use that to bezel our stone. Okay, so I've got a pretty good amount of length here, getting there anyway. And the goal is that I want to be able to make this long enough that it will fit around the perimeter of the whole rock. And you'll see that it's really nice and loose and bendy. So whether I form this into a circle or not, which I will be, I will still be able to have enough flexibility in my piece that it's squirming all over the place, don't mind me. I should have enough flexibility in there that it will actually conform to the rock. And then we'll come in and we'll tighten it around with the size 15-0s, and we should have a nice little bezel. Okay, so if you're following along, if you have a cabochon, it doesn't matter what shape you use. Whether you use a round, or as long as it's got corners that are not triangular, like really sharp corners, it'll work on most somewhat rounded shapes. I'll show you a couple of different ones that I've got here. So on these shapes, they're rounded somewhat at least. Even this one should work really well. So it doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter the shape really. As long as you use the brick stitch and your tension isn't super tight, it shouldn't be a real challenge to be able to get it to fit this stone. Okay, so I will be back once I've got this long enough to fit this, and then I'll show you how we enclose it into a circle. Okay, so another quick little bit of info for you. When you do end this, bring this into the middle, hopefully that'll be visible enough. Kind of come in a little bit closer. You see I changed needles. I was having some issues here for a while. But at the beginning, the two beads that we started with are offset on the screen here. Your orientation, they're offset upwards. And these ones are offset downwards. So when you end this, you want that. You want these two to be opposite from each other. We are pretty much at the length that I need. And I've got both my two ends here in opposite offset directions. Now, and this does fit pretty much perfectly around my stone, by the way. So I'll just put that around for you to see. It's a little fiddly to do this, but those two ends meet up pretty much perfectly. But had the offset been different, where they're both on the same side, and this fit around here perfectly, I would go ahead and add one more on in order to make sure that they are that they're offset, because we can actually make this a little bit tighter with our smaller beads anyway. So even if it's just like one bead set too big, I mean, we don't want it huge, but if it's this one bead set too big, then that's okay. Now, so this is the part that is that can be a little bit difficult to follow here. So I'm going to take my two ends and I'm going to sort of hold them together, and they should be offset. So you'll see, hopefully you can see this. This one is off to my right, or your left, and then this one is over to my left. So you see how there's a gap underneath here on the right hand side, and then a gap underneath there on the left hand side. Okay, so here's where it gets a little bit tricky, and I'm going to try and do this and leave everything kind of gapped open. So this is my tail end on my left hand side. tuck that under there so it doesn't get in the way and doesn't confuse you, and it's not going to want to go at all. Trap it. There we go. So I want to keep that out of the way. Okay, so the one I want to focus on is, this is where my my leading thread is coming out on the right hand side of mine. So I'm going to take the thread straight across here to the bead closest to me on the tail end on the right hand side as well. Okay, and we'll leave that somewhat loose. And then I'm going to come back up here. I don't want to get caught in that loop there. So I'm going to come back up the bead on the left hand side. So I've come down the right. I'm going to go back up the bead on the left hand side. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go underneath the thread bridge between those two beads over here. I was going to leave everything loose for now so you can see. If I can get my needle in there and not take my fingers off. Okay. And then I'm going to just pull. So my thread was coming out this right hand side or your left hand side. I put it down on the right hand side of this one. So whatever side this is coming out, put it down the same side. Then I came back up this bead and pulled, and then I put my thread underneath that thread bridge. Okay, so that's where we're at now. I'm going to pull it a little bit tighter, and now I want to come back up this bead again. Okay, and then I'm going to just pull everything closed, and it should actually sit in the proper offset. Okay, so that's now connected back together. But now we've got this nice little circle here, and I'm coming out of sort of this down bead right here. I want to move my thread so it's coming into one of the up bead positions. So one of the beads that's sitting on the outside. Okay, so that's where I'm going to move my thread to and get my tail out of the way. And I'm just going to pull that. Okay, so that circle is now closed. And just to double check, always double check, I'm going to put this over top of my rock to make sure that yes, indeed, it fits around, which it does. It's a little bit of a loosish fit, and that's fine. Now, what I want, and it might be sort of hard to see this, but what I want is, I want for the height of the beads to come up so they're just almost coming over this edge here. So they're down too low. So I'm going to take it off the rock for a moment. All right. So now here's where we start our peyote stitch. And I'm gonna leave my tail thread where it's at for the time being. I'm not going to worry about that. So now you see here, I've got my thread coming out of the bead on the outside here rather than where it was on the inside. So we've got these beads that are sticking out on the outside. All we're going to do is we're going to fill in these gaps right here with beads all the way around. Okay, so how we do that is I pick up one bead, and I'm coming out of this sticking out bead. I'm going to go to the next bead that's sticking up and just put my needle through that one. So that's very basic peyote. And when I pull, okay, you'll see this bead fills in that gap, but it sits above these two beads. Okay, so I'm going to rotate that. I will pick up another bead, my thread's coming out here, I'm going to put my needle in the next bead that is sticking up. So very easy. A very easy start to tubular peyote. So I'm going to go all the way around until I get to sort of the last few here, and then I'll show you how to get up to the next row, called a step up. All right, I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I'm just down to the last few here that I need to put on. Now, you'll notice where my tail is. This means I'm getting fairly close to where I have to step up to the next row. And let me just show you something. So you'll see here where I've already bezeled, and I've come around this way. You'll see 2 beads, 3 beads, 2 beads, 3 beads, 2 beads, 3 beads. And over here where I haven't finished, you'll get 2 beads offset, 2 beads offset, 2 beads offset, 2 beads offset. So you know you're not quite done yet. And this is the part that can get very tricky. And I know for me, I think I've mentioned on a video before where I found peyote really difficult to figure out, and I don't know why. Everybody talks about how hard right angle weave is, and I took to that like a duck to water. I just found it so logical and easy. Peyote, I'm not a terribly visual learner. I'm not a very visual person. So things that people would point out visually to me didn't always work, but I know most people are visual, so that's what I'll do for you. So I'm coming out of one of my lower beads again. I will pick up a bead, and I'm coming out of this lower bead. I have to go into the next upper bead by skipping over that gap. Okay, and I got to pick up another one and go into this next one here. And now what you should notice here, let me just get my fingers out of the way, is we've got these 2 beads here. So we've got a set of 3, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3. So that's that means we're not quite done yet. Now, I've got my thread coming out of this bead here, and you might be tempted to pick up a bead and go into the top one of that 3, but no. So I've got my thread coming out of here, I've got my lower bead, and that's the next upper bead here, and then that's the first bead I put on to the next row that I'm working on currently. So what I will do is I will put my needle into this bead right here, but also I want to step up into the next row, so at the same time I can also go through that bead where there's that very first set of 3. So I'm actually going at an angle through 2 beads. And I'm going to pull. And when I put the little red beads on, it will actually look, it will be easier to see because it'll be a different color. All right, so I'm going to leave it like that for the time being. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my stone back here, and I'm actually going to fit my circle back around the stone so you can see. So that's a very nice fit. So what that means is we're now going to be working with the 15s only. So I'm going to clean up my bead mat a little bit. I don't need these guys really anymore. So I will clean that up. And I also, because I'm working with 15s, I'm going to go to my thinner needle. So I'll do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so that needle's all threaded. Now you'll see that we've still got all of these little gaps here. So we're going to be doing the exact same thing that we did with these beads. We're going to fill in those gaps, but this time with the little red beads. What that will do is it will actually kind of curve both sides in, and that will be what will grip the rock here. So let me just show you the first few, and then I'll show you the step up at the end as well. So I will pick up one little red bead. My thread is coming out of this bead. I'm going to jump over the gap to the next bead that's sticking out. And put my needle in there and pull. So you can see that little red bead is filling that gap. I'll pick up the next red bead. Thread is coming out of this one, jump across the gap to that next bead. Okay, so I'm going to continue on until I get to the last few from the end, and then I'll show you the step up. I just have a few more to go. And now you can probably, hopefully, see it a little better with these two contrasting colors. And now you see I have one more gap here I have to fill. And where my thread has to go is into this silver bead here. And then to step up, I would have to go up into that red bead as well into the next row so I can work on the next row. So I'll pick up my bead. I'll go through that silver bead. Sorry, it's hard for me to get this angle with these needles. And then I will also go through that red bead there. So I'm going through both of those beads to step up into the next row, because I will do another round. And I don't know if you can see, but the top of this, where these red beads are starting to curve in a little bit. So I'm going to add another round of red, and then I'll show you the step up. Now, incidentally, you can see that my tail thread is back here, and I've crept up a few beads where I've ended off. And that's going to happen as you do more rows. Where you end off will be farther and farther from the tail thread. So don't really count on the tail thread to necessarily tell you when you need to step up again. So I'm going to do another round. I'll get close to the end and I'll do yet another step up with you. So down to the last two. So go into the red one. And you see how there's a single red here before there's that stack of two, the very first stack of two I run into. That's how I know really I'm at the end and that I'm going to be stepping up now. So I'll pick up my last bead, and what I would do is I would actually, if I was going to do yet another round, and I might do a decorative one, but because I'm not going to be doing another round here, I'm just going to go through this red bead here on the bottom rather than both of them, because I'm actually going to go over to the other side now in a moment. But let me just tighten that up first. So what I want to do now is I'm actually going to go over on the diagonal, and so I'm coming out of this little red bead here. I'm going to go through on a diagonal over to the other side, because I'll bezel that side as well. So that I'm coming out of this silver one, I want to go to the one on the diagonal to it. And then to the next one. There we go. Now, I'm coming out of this sort of middle one of the three here. Because I'm going to be bezeling this way, and I would have to kind of bezel towards me, which I'm quite comfortable doing, but you may want to continue going forward. And if you do, so that thread's coming out of the middle there, what I'm going to do is so the bead beside it on the very outer row, I'm actually going to bring my needle back towards me in the opposite direction, so that when I get ready to bezel this side, now, I'll move my tail out of the way, now I can keep going that way if I wish. But let's put this onto the stone again, this bezel. In fact, I'm going to put it in that side. I'll move this into the center. It's just this is a little less lumpy than that. So now I can take this and I can put it on top of my stone. And I might have to really push this a lot to get the stone in there. Made that fairly tight. Really squeeze that in there. And now I'm going to have to bezel this side with my little red stones to tighten up this side. And this can be a little bit tricky, especially with these stones here. I'm going to work this towards me because for me, I just have an easier time doing that. I'm going to hold this out of my way. And this is the part that can get very, very fiddly. So just bear with it. And this is actually a pretty tight fit on this stone. So you just have to keep plugging away at it and working with it and kind of making it sit where you want it to. And that can be a little bit of a challenge when you do that, but just keep at it. So I'm going to do my step up. So I'm going to go through that last silver bead and then up into that red bead there and pull. So it's kind of stable now, but you can see hopefully that I'm definitely going to need another round of reds, and then I might do a decorative edge on both sides. I'm going to do a decorative edge, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one bead in between every two beads. So let's have a look at how I would do that. So I'm coming out of this top red bead here. So I'll pick up another red bead and I will go through the next red bead. Now, this only works if you've got an even number all the way around here, by the way. It only works if you have an even number. Okay, so there we go. I'll put that one on. Now the next thing I'm going to do, so I just put that red on there and I'm coming out of this red one. So I'm going to put my needle without putting any beads on through this lower red as well as the next red up here. So effectively, I'm just skipping a spot there. Okay. So now I'm coming out of this bead. I will pick up another red bead and I will go to the next one over. And pull that. You see how it's kind of just giving me a little zigzag? So now I'm coming out of that bead. I'm going to go to the red bead below it and go through that and then step up to the next upper red bead. So I'm going to finish this with the decorative edging, and when I'm done I will come back and show you. Okay, so I have one last one to put on. And by the way, you should notice that my tail is off. I just clipped it because I don't really feel like I necessarily needed to even tie it in. Okay, so I'm going to put my last one on and go through there. There we go. And now normally I would go through the lower and the upper one, but I don't need to. So now I'll go through that lower one because I want to make my way now to the other side. So I'm just going to kind of zigzag my way over, and here's where sometimes I can actually pick up 2 at a time. And, okay. So I think if I go through, bear with me, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get myself into the position that I need to be in order to get my beads on. Come on, needle. There we go. And I think that should get me to the position I need to be in, yeah, because there's a peak here on this side, and that's the exact opposite side there. So I'm going to finish the scalloped edge off on this side the exact same way I did this side, and then I will be back and show you the finished product, and then we'll figure out where we're going to put the bail. Hello, I am back, and it's actually the next morning. My camera battery died last night, and it's the only one I've got. So what I did is I finished off the nice decorative edging here on both sides, and I made my way up to the top here. And it might be a little bit hard for you to see, but I've got, where am I? So I'm coming out of a row of 3 right here. That's where my needle is coming out. Then I've got a little row of 2 and then another row of 3 right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 1 bead. So I'm coming out, and it's probably really hard for you to see this color. It's just ridiculous, but I'm coming out. There's my row of 3 here. So I'm coming out of the center bead from the row of 3. Right there is the row of 2 and then another row of 3. So I'm actually going to skip over the row of 2 and go into that center bead there of that row of 3. And I'm just going to pull. I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to pick up another bead. And the bead that I just put on, I'm going to actually go through that. And I'm going to kind of snake my way back and forth. Flip it around again, pick up another bead, and go through that bead that I just added. So I'll just continue on with this a little bit until I get enough length that I can show you how to turn it into a bail. Okay, so I think I've got enough here, and my threads I'm going to run out any moment as well anyway. So what I've done is let me grab this needle here. So my initial bead went on top here on my left-hand side. So that's where my initial bead is, sorry, that one right there is sitting on top of the 2 center beads from the row of 2. I'm not explaining that very well. Maybe I'll just show you. But I've also got, so the offset is on the left-hand side, and then this offset is on the right-hand side. So my thread is coming out here. What I'm going to do is snake my way back around so I can come out of this bead so I can connect it over here. So that's what I'll do, is I'm just going to go back down through the bead beside this one, that's where the thread is coming out. And then I'm also going to go diagonally to the bead that is beside the one I want to come out of. So that one, just underneath it. And I'll pull through. And then I can come out this way. And what that allows me to do is to go through this bead right here that I want to. So I want to go back to that. There we go. So I'm coming through the bead that's just above this one right here that I just went through. So I'm coming out of that bead and going through the bead that's just above it. And then I'm also going to kind of angle my needle over to come out of the other side. There we go. So I'm kind of coming out of those 2 beads there. And now I can just give a little pull. Make sure everything is in there really nice and tight. I think what I want to do is come back around through that same bead again that I was coming out of. Want to really make sure that this is reinforced very well. And I'm sorry, I know my fingers are in the way. But all I'm doing is I'm just going around and around those 3 beads basically again. And now I really do have to end my thread because I'm not going to have any room to tie this off. So all I want to do is I want to weave back and forth, get rid of my thread, and then I can just simply clip it off. And that's what I will do. And then that's my little pendant done. All I have to do is put a chain through there now, and it's ready to go. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. I know this bail part was really bad. I will try and do another video with a better demonstration of the bail, how to connect it back in. That was not very good. I'll try that with a bigger set of beads next time. So if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and the next video after this, I have finally almost finished my my beaded Métis sash bag. So that's coming up right away on the very next video. In fact, I'm going to film that right after this one. So you can look forward to that. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.